everybody, my name is Kara Brown. I'm an urban fantasy author and a writer for Otherworld Inc. and Three Fates Press, and we are going to do a book review about Nevernight. This book, right here. I would like to direct your attention to the fact that I actually bought the physical copy of this book. That is a very good indicator about how the rest of this video is going to go. So if you're new and you've never seen a book review by myself before, the way it goes is that I start drinking lots of alcohol while talking about a book. My book reviews typically involve a non-spoiler section and then a spoiler section. I do notify you when the spoiler section is about to happen so that way none of the story is ruined for you. These books are not given to me. I just kind of look at them, I'm interested, and I decide to review them, so whatever I pick is whatever I pick. And talking about whatever I'm going to pick, I know that drunk me in the future is going to forget to mention this, so I'm going to go ahead and mention the book that I'm going to review next month in case you want to read and comment on that next video, and that book is going to be Cursed by Night by Jada Storm. I'm going to put it right here. Future me, please remember to leave links and stuff down below so that way people can go ahead and check out the book. I know the cover looks a little interesting. That's probably why Past Me bought it, but it's been in my Kindle for a little while, so I'm going to read it, comment on it, and I did read the first few pages and I was intrigued, so I'm hoping that this is going to be it's going to be good. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about Nevernight, so that's what we're going to do. So, in short, Nevernight has to do with a girl named Mia as she tries to get into the Red Church, which is a church of would-be assassins as they go through class and try to survive their classes while not getting killed by their teammates, which reminds me a lot of high school myself. It is definitely not in your typical setting. It is in a fantasy setting. We got a lot of stuff going on in this universe. We got 3 suns. We've got like some, I can't even begin to summarize basically the world building that happens in this world, but I definitely did like it. There's a lot of intrigue, there's a lot of things that are going on with it, and I think one of the things that I can really appreciate is that there's almost like a Victorian Rome feel to like the buildings when they're being described, and you're kind of seeing things as people are walking around, and it's done in a way that really makes me think that the author has actually been to Rome. You can always tell when somebody is writing about something and they've actually been there versus they did some research on Wikipedia or they talked to somebody that's been there, and I really get the impression that the author of this book really did go to these places. As somebody else who has traveled the world, I always really appreciate seeing like those little telltale signs in reading. The other thing I do want to mention is that I liked and hated a lot of these characters, and when I say hate, I mean like I hated them because they were meant to be hated. And it just, the way that this was kind of built up was done in just such a, I don't want to say genuine manner, but was done very artfully in some places. And like there's there's one character, her name is Jessamine, like definitely hate this character. Like every time she walks into like, you know, the scene on the page, I'm like I just don't like that person at all. Bad attitude, bad everything, but love to hate this character. And there are other characters that I'm like, I really like this character, and I have a good time with that character, and every time they come onto the scene, I'm like, yeah, that character's here. Yeah, yeah. Now, if you've actually kind of, like, if you tuned into my last video where I've talked about how I read a lot of books, so sometimes I kind of, like, shoot myself in the foot because I know things that are usually supposed to happen. And there are plot twists in this book where I was like, I think that's a plot twist. That could be a plot twist. Like, I'm not sure if that's a plot twist. And when there are, like, some major plot twists that happen, and in both times, even though I wasn't sure if it was going to happen or not, I was still surprised. I was like, oh! So just those things alone were just completely amazing. I really did like that. There's a lot of wit in this book. There's a little bit of British humor in there, too. I think that's partly why I really enjoyed it a lot, because I grew up overseas, I grew up in England, so every time I see dry humor kind of creep its way into the page, I'm like, oh, I see what you did there. So there is one thing that I would actually like to talk about in regards to the book, and this is a big deal maker or deal breaker for a lot of the people who actually read this book. I kind of noticed it when I started reading because I go to a writing workshop, and I know sometimes when I'm reading books, like in the back of my head, I'm like, oh, so-and-so would hate this part, and so-and-so would love this, and so on and so forth. Definitely, when I was reading it, I did struggle a little bit with the reading just because of the way that it was structured. In some places, I was like, oh, that's really clever. And in other places, I was like, why are we doing it that way? And I got it on Kindle originally, and then stuff ended up happening over here, and I just could not actually sit down and read, but I still wanted to hear the story. And that's when it clicked for me, because I was listening to the narrator as they were telling the story, and how do I explain this? Okay, so for me to explain this, I need to dive back a little bit. In my earlier college years, when I was actually working on my associates and I was taking an elective, one of the electives that I took was a verbal storytelling class. You know, you had the person in front of you, they were telling the story, they had their airs and the way, and the way that this story, like when I heard it on the Audible, immediately made me think of I am literally in front of somebody and they are telling me the story. There was a lot of the verbal storytelling prompts and initiatives that are happening in the book that typically only happen when somebody's telling you the story. For example, like the way that the sentences are structured, some of the repetitive phrases, such as the cat that was not a cat, all that stuff. Those are all kind of like part of the storytelling, like verbal storytelling style. And the moment that I heard the narrator start talking, I literally could picture this person sitting in front of me. They were talking, they were doing the dramatic poses, they were doing the lean-ins, they had the prompt. Like, I could immediately visualize that. So when I went back to actually having to read it on the Kindle, when I wasn't driving around and all that stuff, when I knew that was the kind of the style that we were doing, it made it a lot easier to read. And I know some people who may not have experienced that are not going to like that at all. And to be fair, the book does start out that way. So on the first page, there is a paragraph, and it goes along like this. I mention this by the way of warning, O gentle friends, that your narrator shares no such restraint. And if the unpleasant realities of bloodshed turn your insides to water, be advised now that the pages in your hand speak of a girl who was to murder as minstrels are to music. That right there is an immediate clue, as somebody who actually did like the training for the verbal storytelling, that this is the style, this is the template. And I guess the big reason I really want to hammer that in is because I know a lot of people are very particular with the way that things are described and the way that the formatting should be, especially now that there are interior format awards. And so when people come in and they see something that doesn't fit the typical layout of a book, they're probably not going to like it. So if you decide that you want to get into this book, just know that it's told from the verbal storytelling perspective, not the literary kind of thing. And I would give it a shot if you've never tried it before. Just kind of see if it's for you. Don't like condemn the book for it. And I guess I'm saying that because before, obviously, I come on and I do these videos, I do go in, I'm kind of like, I wonder what people think about this book besides me. And a lot of people just hate it. They just hate it. And it makes me really sad because I actually do like that style. And I guess kind of piggybacking off of that a little bit is that this kind of writing has a very romantic, poetic feel to it. And this is why in my brain I was like, so-and-so at writing group isn't going to like that, because there is a very colorful way of talking about things that are going on. So if, for example, like instead of saying, I think I'm using this example I read from Goodreads, instead of saying somebody kicked so-and-so in the nuts, they're basically saying they connected their foot to their groin to ensure that they would have no, further children in their lives. And I actually thought that was really funny. I know what passage that is. And I really liked it a lot. I thought that was really creative. And again, that was me kind of thinking like, oh, that's a little bit of British humor there. But it is romantic in that way. And there is some subtle wit that's kind of tied into all of the descriptions. And it's for some people and it's not for some people. If you're the kind of person that wants a quick like so-and-so like punch so-and-so and you don't want it to be like purple prose or anything like that, maybe not the book for you. But again, I actually really enjoyed that. I thought it was really brilliant. So obviously there has to be, it's not fair if I just come on here and all I do is talk about how amazing a book is. I do have to talk about some of the stuff that didn't go very well, right? So here is the thing that kind of irked me just a little tiny bit. So in storytelling, we are always told to find a way to work the world building gracefully into the narrative, right? That's kind of how we do it. You're gradually exposing the reader to this world and you're just doing small steps at a time. That's usually why you have what we call a talking bob. So this is Bob. Bob is a metaphor for when you have two heads bobbing at each other to talk about stuff that the reader needs to know. And the way that this works is that if you have something that has to involve world building, you typically have some greenhorn or a new person that shows up and they ask a lot of like naive questions that the reader is going to ask, so that way the world building can be done in. And that's why we have Bobs. Bobs usually come in and they explain a lot of the stuff so that way the reader is grounded, they have some context knowledge, and they can move forward. Now, there's asking really dumb questions for the sake of asking dumb questions, but there's also like asking questions that make sense at the time. I don't want to name the book because that makes me a bad person, but there was a book that was written, and in the book, near the end of it, there was a lady who should have known all of these things, but she was asking questions like she was in third grade, right down to like, what is magic? And it's like, aren't you a witch? Like, I thought you knew what that, it was just kind of like that. So when people are utilizing a Bob in that sense, it's usually because that person isn't grounded in that knowledge and they need that assistant. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because in this story, there are footnotes. There are a lot of footnotes. And I mean a lot of footnotes. In the Kindle version, I don't have to worry about the footnotes. I read on and I make some assumptions about what's going on. Life is good. In the Kindle, no, that's not happening. In the Kindle, if there are footnotes, the entire story pauses because obviously the narrator has to read everything that's going on within the footnotes. Initially, I thought that was really annoying, but then when I came back to the Kindle and I saw that those were actually the footnotes, I realized, like, okay, I can't really get away with it. I might as well listen to the footnotes. But I have to say that some of these footnotes are actually really freaking hilarious. So, I have a sneaking suspicion that a lot of people got the Kindle and then they got hit with the info dump and then they got really upset about it. Where if you're getting the physical copy or the Kindle, not such a problem, but if you are a Kindle listener, then you can't get away with that. It's happening. You're just going to have to swim through that. Now, at this point, gentle viewer, we are going to start getting into spoilers. So if you actually want to read this book and not have it spoiled by myself, this is the time to turn away. But I would appreciate if you would check out my links below and maybe consider purchasing my own book and leaving a review. That would be great. Thanks. Spoilers! I got questions about this universe. So many questions, but these are the good questions. Like, I want to know more about these 3 moons. I want to know more about the Dark Mother who is associated with the Dark Church. I want to infiltrate this freaking government system that's going on. Like, there is so much going on. The way that this book opens up, the way that Jay wrote this, I'm first name basis, right? The way that Jay wrote this was just absolutely brilliant. Like, I was just like, I almost wanted to take notes because the way that they were able to kind of talk about the first time murdering somebody and the first time having sex was just like, wow. One thing that I really wish I could have mentioned in the non-spoiler, but there's no way to talk about it without spoiling parts of the story. A lot of people are coming out and asking for representation about like different groups of people. Let me tell you, there is a representation of a group of people that I want more spotlight on, and those are people who are disabled. There is a badass in this story. His name is Solus, and he is blind, and he chops off arms. Holy flying fuck. That was so cool. I absolutely love that moment because how could you not? So Solus in the story is the master of songs at the Red Church, which means that he is the guy that's in charge of making sure that all the acolytes who are there are trained in how to use weapons. So blind guy teaching other people how to use weapons. He is absolutely one of my favorite characters. I absolutely love him. He doesn't get a lot of spotlight, but when he's on there, I'm gobbling it up. I absolutely love it. And one of the things that I really like is kind of, and I don't think this was the author's intention, this is just me as the reader interpreting it this way. At one point, Mia oversteps herself, right? She gets cocky, she tries to pick a fight with him. He responds by chopping off her arm, okay? Makes an example out of her, shows the rest of the acolytes that don't fuck with me, I am at this church, I am in charge, blah, 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 blah. But he doesn't say it that way. He literally just chops off her arm and he continues moving on with business. And part of the reason that I actually like this moment is kind of what happens afterwards, because Mia gets her arm chopped off, but it ends up being grown back. So the arm is not gone. It comes back. And I don't want to spoil how that works, but it's super creepy and I absolutely love it. But one of the interesting things is that while her arm is getting strengthened back up so that way she can use it properly again, she stopped going to song practice, right? She stops going to song practice because her arm's not strong enough. And at one point, she goes home to the guy that has been taking care of her for the last few days. His name is Mercurio. I really love him too. He's the badass uncle I wish I had. And, you know, she makes the comment, and he's like, well, why haven't you been going to songs? She's like, well, my arm got chopped off. And he's like, why would you let that stop you? And this is the part of me not thinking that the author intended this, but this is the psychologist in me coming out, because a lot of times when stuff happens in our lives and it's a really, like, it's either a traumatizing event or it's definitely a huge obstacle, a lot of times we won't progress with going forward with it. We'll stop, we'll do other things, we'll do a workaround, whatever. And this is almost like a weird metaphor for that, because Mia doesn't end up going to songs, right? She doesn't work on her swordsmanship. She ends up falling really far behind. And the reason she does that is because she tells herself that her arm isn't strong enough, where some individuals will be kind of like, well, I lost a leg, I'm going to keep going. Before you argue with me with that, I'm friends with vets, okay? Some of them don't have limbs anymore and they continue to progress on. So it was a really interesting moment for me to kind of see her make that connection and say, okay, even though my arm isn't very strong, I should still go. And the Achilles heel that ends up forming becomes her strength in the end, which that's really good as well. And even though this is the spoiler section, that's definitely one thing I don't want to spoil, but it's really good. But digressing back to my previous point about how there's representation for people who are disabled in this book, It's really good. There's another fellow in here who is mute, why he's mute is questionable. Mia and I are pretty much sharing the same suspicion about why he's mute at this point. But I really like this guy. His name is Hush. He doesn't talk, and he is just like, he's definitely like that undercurrent character that you don't really realize how dangerous he is until the moment comes, and it's like, shit. Checking my notes. Kanpai. So at this point of the story, I do want to talk about the romance that does happen in the book, and I actually really do like the romance, and the reason I like it is because you have these two characters, they're really interested in each other, but they have enough self-awareness to know that they're in a school of assassins, right? So they're not going to become the destined pair that will overcome obstacles with their love. Like, they realize it, and they treat it with, like, a kind of maturity that I don't even see in typical day-to-day romances that my friends involve themselves in. Trick, who is honestly one of my favorite characters in the story, I really appreciate the way that he sees things, how he processes things. He's a really good character. I think he's really solid, absolutely love him. What happens to him in the story makes me really sad. I can't get around that. But I think Trick, when it comes to Mia, is a really complimenting character, because even given the way that Mia's way of progressing with things and how she decides to divulge into other stuff, Trick is a really good counterbalance for that. She's going off in one way, he's coming back and it's like, are you really sure about that? And I just really appreciate that. And he, in some ways, is really, I don't want to say he's used as a means to, what am I trying to say here? I honestly think the reason I like Trick so much is because a lot of the things that I was thinking Trick was saying when it came to what was going on, how people were progressing forward, and his reactions were honestly reactions that I would have. So I really like Trick because I identify with Trick. Trick is definitely my kind of character. I really like him. I really like Trick. So that brings me to the end of the video. I have to end. My glass is empty, and I'm not gonna do a refill. That's too much before noon. Like it's like 11. I can't drink that much before lunch. But yeah, regardless of what I say or what you may think about the book, just at least go check it out. Look at the sample chapter. See if it's for you. I know that there is a huge fan base with some of the book reviewers that are out there, and people will either like go with it or go against it depending on what that person says. But again, these are just my personal thoughts. I thought the book was great. I know some people hate it. Check it out. See if it's for you. If you like it, support the guy. If you don't. So, as another reminder, next month I am going to be reading Cursed by Night by Jada Storm. So, if you would like to check that out and read it and then comment on the video that I make next month, you're more than welcome to. It is on Kindle Unlimited, so if that's the program you're enlisted in, that's how you can get on that. And if you happen to have read Nevernight, feel free to comment on what your thoughts and opinions on this video were. I'm definitely interested. Again, what I have to say about a book is not the end-all, be-all. I definitely would encourage you as a reader and a viewer and to just check stuff out and see if it is for you. Obviously, everybody has different tastes. We're individuals, blah, 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 blah. You may like it, may not. That brings me to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. Really do appreciate it. Again, I do want to know your thoughts and opinions in regards to the book. If you'll read it, if you won't read it, blah, blah, blah. And again, like I said a little bit ago, please don't just take my opinion for gospel. Go check it out for yourself and make a decision then. But again, that's the end of the video. I really appreciate you watching, and I look forward to talking to you all next week. So, the truth of the matter is that I'm never alone in here. Never ever alone in here. I've got this sweet little girl, and it wouldn't be a Carol video if I didn't have my dogs in it. There she is. Hey, Kissy. Earn mommy some money now. Come on. Oh, what a good girl. Yeah, look at that smile.